So 25 things to know about the router. Now, if I come up to you right now and I ask you, because probably maybe you know a few things about, routers, or maybe you think that you know a lot, but will you be able to come up with 25 things about what routers do? And you see, probably you will not be able to, even though you know them. But because you cannot connect that information in a way that's going to help you for you to answer that question, that's the reason why you sound like everyone else. You carry yourself through your IT career like everyone else. What I just told you, it's gold. Think about that. Okay, so again, regardless of how much you know about this topic, open your mind, because I know that you will be able to get a lot out of this video if you open your mind, and obviously if you listen, and the way that I will walk you through it. So let's get right into it. The first thing that I was thinking was, routers read IP addresses. That's the first thing that came up in my mind. So if someone asked me like right now, hey Jorge, can you tell me a few things about routers? What would your answer be? Oh, IP addresses. They're all about IP addresses, because let me tell you, switches, all about MAC addresses. But routers, all about IP addresses. And by the way, that's IP addresses. We can also call them logical addresses. Logical addresses. Okay, why? Why do you call IP addresses logical addresses? What would your answer be? Yes, I'm asking you, what would your answer be? And obviously, answer that question not from a technical point of view, by answering that question in a technical way, in a way that you can connect with me. So how would you do that? You see, it's a basic question that I know you know, but how will you communicate that to me in a way that I can connect with you, in a way that I'm like, wow, you really know more than the other 5 people that I asked this same question. So again, how would you answer that question? Why IP addresses are called logical addresses? You see, I will answer that question probably this way. I will think about like you have computers, right, at home. Yeah, I have a few, and I think more likely that a lot of them, they're laptops, right? Yeah, I have about 2-3 laptops. Okay, so you see, when you connect to your own Wi-Fi network, to your local area network, you will get an IP, and you will have that IP for you to be able to communicate, with the other computers, and obviously for you to be able to go through your ISP, that internet service provider, and reach out, Facebook or YouTube or Yahoo. But you see, when you take that laptop and you go to Starbucks, or let's say that you take the laptop and you take that to a hotel, and you're gonna connect to their network, you will get a different IP address. You're gonna get one of their IP addresses. And that's the reason why we call IP addresses logical addresses, because they're not really physically owned by that physical device. It will change every time that you connect that device, your laptop, to a different network. And that's obviously if it's by default, configured as getting an statically IP address. And that's where the DHCP will be able to provide that to your device. You see how I was able to talk about a few other things obviously related to this topic? And that's exactly what you need to do on any question that they ask you that it's a technical question. Come up with something more than just the technical answer. Think about that, because that makes a lot of sense, and that will help you big time. So again, 1, right? I think about, routers read IP addresses. Number 2, they work on the layer 3 of the OSI model. Not like switches. Switches work on the layer 2 of the OSI model, the data link layer. You see, routers work on the layer 3, and that's basically the network layer of the OSI model. And by the way, we have another device that I know probably you have on your network, and that's a layer 3 switch. And by the way, with those network devices, a layer 3 switch, when you take the switch out of the box, it's just a switch. That's why it's called a switch. But we have the L3 that works on layer 3, and that's because, yes, that physical device can do some routing functions, but only if you type apply that command IP routing. Now it will have that functionality. Not all of it, some of it, like what one of the routers. You see how I was able to come up with something else related to, oh yes, routers work on the layer 3 of the OSI model. Most people out there will be able, will answer that question that way. Oh yeah, you know that routers, yeah, they work on the layer 3 of the OSI model. Yeah, like next. No, what else can you tell me about that? Something that, again, it's gonna tell me a lot more about you, the value that you have to offer. And that's always when you answer a question with more content, with more topics, obviously related to that question, related to the topic, okay? So that's what we have, and obviously we have a few routers. I'm gonna talk about some of the models. And this is, something that you should know. And this basically, like this one, this picture, and that's something that I'm gonna talk about too. If I ask you, like, what can you tell me about this picture? What would your answer be? Well, that router, it's a modular router. And that's because we can add more into this router. That's some weak cards that we call. And that can be for a serial connection. That can be for a Wi-Fi connection. We can add some switching probably in that router. We have options for us to add into that router. This is why they call modular routers. We can add more into it. So going back, right? So number 3, do not work out of the box. And probably this is so basic, right? Like someone asked me, like, Jorge, that's common sense, man. Why would I say that? That's common sense. Well, probably it's not common sense to them. And again, the way that you answer that question, because if I was you, I would be like, another thing that I can tell you about routers is when you take the router out of the box, that router doesn't work like at all. It's like, it will do nothing. But switches, you take the switch out of the box, you plug in a few computers, and obviously if those computers have an IP, they will be able to communicate. Even though you haven't done anything to that switch, you just plug it in on the outlet, and that's it. But you see, routers don't. You really have to connect to it and configure that router in order for that router to work. You see, again, at first, so basic. Oh, routers don't work out of the box. But when I start adding more into it, oh, wow, that makes a lot more sense. I see it. I know that you know a lot more than just what's a router. You cannot see like the big picture. I see the big picture because you put in the picture in front of me. I like you. I like you more than the other 10 candidates. You see how powerful this is? Like, I'm really giving you gold. I'm really giving you gold. So follow us, okay? And like the video, share the video, make sure to comment on this video. Now, do not work out of the box. Now the 4, console port. Just like the switch, right? We have that console port. And the console port is for us to connect this cable, the console cable, obviously, right? In order for that router to work. And obviously that's where we can obviously connect into it and be like, I don't want to connect physically to it. I want to connect remotely. And that's when I can do the remote management option. And I have 2 options. One of them is Telnet, not secure, obviously. And the other one, SSH. Now, what else can you tell me about that? Like, really, what else can you tell me about this? Because this probably is so basic to you, right? Well, one thing that you can say is, Jorge, Telnet, port, 22. TCP, by the way, that protocol is TCP. No, Telnet, it's port 23. Now that I remember. Oh, 22, yes, 22, that's SSH, secure socket shell. Secure shell. My bad, secure socket. Secure shell, okay? So yeah, that's how that information from point A, your computer, to point B, that router, can be encrypted. That way, someone type in into the wire, they're not gonna be able to be like, oh, you're basically sending that password, you're basically sending those commands, so now I know how your router is configured, you see? So again, right, what else can you tell me about that? And I'm going through something so basic, and right here, now that we're talking about the console port, is that one, if I'm not mistaken, is this one. And no, we don't have that. No, we don't on this model. On some of the models, we have now the mini USB. And obviously, probably you watched some other of my videos, and that's the same cable that I show you, right? Like, it's just a console cable. And I don't know where I left that adapter, probably in my book bag. But obviously this is the one that connects to your computer, but when you buy that adapter, that USB adapter, now you have a USB for you to plug it in on your computer, laptop. And this one obviously is the one that you plug it in there. And by the way, well, let me get to that point so I can show you two models that I have, routers. So let's go to number 5. So allow networks to communicate with each other. Okay, so now we are more technical. So routers basically allows networks to communicate with each other. So probably that's one of the first things that you thought of. But you see how, it's been like about 5 minutes, 7 minutes, me talking about something so basic, routers don't work out of the box, they work on the layer 3 of the SMARO, the network layer and blah, 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 IP addresses. But I was able to make that like very interesting because I added some other topics in a way that I can basically sell and market myself to them, to the manager, to the recruiter, or whoever that I'm talking to. That's exactly what you need to do, So here, number 5 out of the 25, allow networks to communicate with each other. Okay, again, that's basic, that makes sense, but what else can you tell me about that? Come on, now that you know better, what else can you tell me about that, about this? Allow networks to communicate with each other. Jorge, that means basically when you have one network with one network ID, probably you have a class C IP, and then let's say that you have another one, network, same, with a different network ID, but same class C IP. But by the way, they have a different, they do not have the default subnet mask. We're doing some subnetting. That's the reason why we have two different networks. So in order for these two networks and devices, computers, printers, servers, in order for them to communicate, we need a router. That's why, it's going to allow these networks to communicate with one another. You see now you're basically putting a picture in front of me instead of you just, it's going to allow for networks to communicate with each other. No, what else can you tell me about that? Again, remember, go through this video. I know that probably you know, maybe most of it, but the way that you communicate, but that's exactly what makes a difference. So that's the reason why I'm going to ask you. Again, go through the entire video and go through video number 2 as well. Now, number 6, it's the gateway, the exit. That will be kind of fun to say someone, right? Remember, they don't want to hire a geek. Someone that's like just technical. Only technical words are going to come up out of your mouth. No, I want to hire a human being, someone that I can connect to, someone. You cannot be, let's say, my friend, but someone that I know I can trust, someone that I know that I can see working with the other team members. So you see, and that's when you are human, when you just have a normal conversation, like when you have a conversation with your friend. So can you tell me another thing about routers? It's the gateway, man. It's the gateway. It's the exit. What that means is that you have one network, the exit, for them to communicate outside of that network, you need a router because that will be that gateway, that exit for them. Like in your computer, when you go to that command prompt and you type ipconfig, /all, you will see like gateway. And guess what? That's the IP address of the router, the connection that you are connected to, the interface. And that's basically the one that's going to allow you to get out of the network. Oh, okay, makes sense. You see how I was able to give a lot more than just, it's just the gateway. Move on, let's go to 7. No. Let's take the time. That's why, my videos take more because I really want to give you different points of view and ways on how you can look at the topic and be like, now that makes sense to me. Now I can make that my own. You see, I go through many training videos myself from other vendors. That's one of the ways that I learn. I have a few other methods, but that's one way. But I always go through this process because I know the process of learning, and that's something that I obviously teach in my coaching program, the process of learning how to learn and how to accelerate the process of learning and how to go through information in a way that you can make it your own, not based on them. They're teaching you something, but now how can you make it your own? Because once you make it your own, guess what? You will be, it will be so much easier for you to recall this information, for you to be able to have a conversation, present it to someone else, teach it to someone else, and obviously for you to be able to apply when you need, when you really need it. Okay? So you see, sign up for the coaching program so I can teach you all of that. But again, I'm giving you a lot of value through these videos. So let's go to number 7. Have an operating system. Okay? That makes sense, right? we have computers, they have an operating system, so obviously, like switches, routers, and that's basically the iOS. Now the question is the version, right? If I'm asked, and this is one thing that I said in another video, if I'm the network engineer, right, and you're going through the job interview process and the manager asks me, hey, Jorge, can you just ask him a few questions just to see if he really knows? I'm like, yeah, one of the questions that I will ask you, I see that you're CCNA. Can you tell me what are the iOSs that you have worked with, the version, and how, if I log into a switch or to a router, can you just give me that command and how you look on the iOS that device has? Will you be able to answer that question? Like I'm asking you right now, will you be able to answer that question? You see? Now, will you be able to come up with versions? Right? Don't be like, oh, I think it's Windows 10, right? No, it's a router. But we have versions way back 11. That's when I went myself through the process and learning CISCO. I remember that was version 11. But right now we have version 15, right? We had version, some end devices out there, they're 12. But you see, that's one thing that you probably don't know. So far up to this point, you're like, Jorge, so far I know this. But now what about if I ask you the additions? And let's focus now on routers, okay? Let's focus now on routers. If I ask you some of the additions based on the iOS, will you be able to tell me how many are out there? Or can you tell me just one or two? Now, I'm asking you, because we have additions out of the iOS that we can put on one of the routers. You see, we have 4. And that's a video probably that I will be doing, but that's for the membership side. Not for just YouTube, for the membership side, because I go in more detail. But you see, there are 4. Will you be able to name them? Come on. Will you be able to name them? You see, we have LAN Light. L-A-N Light. We have LAN Base. And we have IP Base. And we have IP Services. And obviously, the higher you go, the more it will cost. And why? Because it has a lot more to offer. Like that LAN Light, it's just for small businesses that they don't need that many of features. But again, that's something for another video, because that can probably take me another 10 minutes to talk about that. But you see, once you are able to say that, I'm like, wow, out of the 10 people that I asked that question, out of the 10 candidates, you were the only one that gave me that information. So you see, that puts you ahead of the game. That's why go through the 25 things that you better know. Okay, so now you have more information for you to let me do some research about that, because probably you didn't know about those 4 additions. Again, LAN, L-A-N, Light, and then we have LAN Base, and then we have IP Base, and then we have IP Services. So let's move on. 8, have different models. Okay, what type of models? And you better know them. Come on, you better know some of them. It will take you probably 10, 20 minutes for you to go on Google and look some of the models. But if someone asks you and you have no idea, guess what? I do not care that you answer the other technical questions right. That's more likely because you just went through the book, memorized a few things, but when you have no idea about some of the models, come on. I'm going to be like, next. And that's exactly what other people tell me. When I ask questions to managers or high-paid IT engineers, because they go through the same process on interviewing, candidates, and I ask, can you tell me some of the questions that you ask and why you ask those questions? And a lot of it's not just based on the technical, you really have to think outside the box. But you see, this information you will not be able to find nowhere else. And that's common sense, but you don't do that because no one tells you to do that and to approach the process that way. So some of the models we have, it's the 1800s, the 2800s, the 3800s, 7200s, 7600s, and obviously there's a few others. I just wanted to put a few. Let me show you some of them. Like this one, it's a small one. Okay, it's just a small one. Right there, okay? And this is, by the way, an 1800, and you can probably see it right there, okay? And we have here to add a few things. It can be a wireless wake card. Okay, right now they're empty. More interfaces. Okay, so yeah, and by the way, this is a card for that iOS is 32-bit. This is, again, CCNA. Sign up for the membership, and I will tell you. Now, the other one that I have, this model is a 2900, okay? And I don't think I have that one. No, I only have the 2800. So this one is a 2900. And yes, we do have 1900s too, the recent models. But yeah, this is, you see, a little bit bigger. And if I go on the back, I'm going to have the same. Some slots with cards, for me to add probably a serial connection, for me to add from Wi-Fi or, options. that you have, okay? So again, you need to know this. You need to know this. If you go through a process and someone asks you and you have no idea, you just come up with one, more likely they're not gonna like you because you just BS, you went through the job interview process. And just one of those questions is gonna like completely like, they will be like, that's it, you know, I'm enough. This guy really don't know, okay? 9, routers do not forward broadcast. What that means is stopped broadcast, right? So that's so easy for you to come up with that and probably like, yeah, Jorge, that was exactly one of the things that I thought of, you know, that routers do not forward broadcast. They basically stop broadcast. Okay, that's it. That's it. Can you tell me something else? They can tell me more about the other probably topics that you know. What else can you tell me? Because guess what? More likely the other 5 candidates are going to go through the same process, answering the same questions. They're more likely will be answering that question the same way that you just did, right? So why? How I'm gonna remember you if you just sound like everyone else, right? So one way for you to say is like, yeah, routers, you know, do not forward broadcast. You know, they stop broadcast. You know, you have the switch that's a layer 2 device, and if that switch is just based on the default, meaning like just one VLAN, by the way, the native VLAN, by the way, VLAN 1. You have only just one broadcast domain. And obviously when you connect a computer into it, it's gonna send this broadcast saying, hey, you know, like I need an IP, so it's gonna look for a DHCP. So, but regardless of that process, you know, that broadcast, that message is gonna basically get to each one of those, any computer, any device is connected to that switch. And obviously one of those connection will be to a router because that's the gateway. And you don't want that broadcast that belongs on that network to go to probably 5 networks that you are connected to. Then you're gonna have a mess, right? You're gonna have a broadcast storm. But that's the reason why routers stop broadcast, for that not to happen. Oh, you see how I was able just to come up with something? And obviously, there's a few other things that you can come up with. I'm just giving you like an idea on how to do that. Okay? So 10. Have a routing table. Because let me tell you, switches have a MAC address table, CAM table, content addressable memory. I think that's what CAM. But anyways, right? So routers have a routing table. Okay, what else can you tell me about that? And that's where now probably you're thinking, okay, Jorge, now I get it. Now I know how can I answer a technical question, how can I create a conversation out of a topic in a way that I can really position myself really well in front of them so they can see that I'm a badass, you know, I have a lot more to offer than other people, even though probably they know the same as you, but you are the one that's able to communicate that to them, not the other candidates, and that's why more likely they're gonna hire you. Okay, so 10, have a routing table. 11, that routing table, talking about that, right, it can be through a static or dynamic route. So we have a routing table, and the routing table will be basically based on a static or dynamic route. Okay, static, that means that you went through and you basically added a static route. How to get, you know, from this network to that network. You did it, like you're gonna go through this path. Okay, now dynamic, that's because, and that's we'll move on to the next one, when we're gonna use some of the routing protocols, right? Some of the routing protocols, obviously, that you know are REP, OSPF, EIGRP, ISIS. This is obviously something that you probably know, it's not that out there. A lot of you know, many people don't know, but this is something that they use on the ISP providers. Not as much, but some ISPs providers, they use that internally. Now, we have BGP, Border Gateway Protocol. That's an external protocol. And that's more likely, yes, where the ISP use that, okay? So again, how can you put this information, you know, from 10 all the way to 12? Like, okay, we have a routing table, and that's basically built on static and dynamic routes. Static, I told you, you are the one that basically goes there and say, hey, for you to get to this network, you have to go through there. But more likely we'll be using, you know, it will be filled with dynamic routes, and that's because we are using some of the dynamic routing protocols. And that's like REP, as you know, more likely you will not find that. More likely the ones that you will be finding is OSPF and EIGRP, and the ones that you really know really well, okay? And both, you know, right now, the company that I work for, they use both. And they're trying now, now are trying to go and only using OSPF, but so far, both. And that's more likely, you know, depending on the job that you're gonna go for. Sometimes they're gonna have both. Sometimes they're gonna have OSPF, but maybe they're gonna have EIGRP. But when they know that you know both, it's good on you. Okay, so make sure you know that. And that last one before ending this video number 1, makes smart routing decisions based on IP addresses. So routers basically do that, right? Not like switches. Switches, basically what they do, they make smart decisions on how to get from point A to point B, and the local area network and Ethernet network based on the MAC address. But not routers, they're all based on IP addresses, okay? And that's exactly how they're gonna go based on. They're gonna forward based on IP addresses. Again, all goes back on the routing table, and you better know how to read the routing table really well. You know, even in some companies, there's like, you know, lines and lines and lines and lines. And by you kind of going through it and having a big idea on what that is, you know, the more time that you put into it and study that, that's going to help you big time. Why? Because eventually you will be able to kind of like go through it fast and be able to come up with like, okay, I know what's going on. Like, I know the type of IP addresses they're using, the type of networks that they're using, how it's configured, what dynamic protocol are they using, if there's any static, why that is, and all these good things. So that's it. That's all I have for video number 1. So go to video number 2 because I have 12 more things that I need to tell you. Some of them, they're really, really, really cool. And again, it's not all about just coming up with a few things, but will you be able to communicate that and be able to talk about other topics related to that topic? That way you will look like a badass in front of them. That's the question. So again, like the video, share the video, comment on the video, and don't forget to follow me on Instagram. All the links and all of that should be underneath this video. So you know what to do. Do that. And once you do, go to the next video and I will talk to you there on video number 2 out of this topic, the 25 things that you need to know about routers. So I'll talk to you there.